All right, thanks everyone for joining us for the third webinar of a four-part series. It's entitled Dental Benefits in Your Future. It's going to explore recent trends in insurance coverage and how they affect your future dental practices. Sponsored by Aspen Dental, this series on the evolving business of dentistry is offered expressly for you as members of the NextCDS dental student user community. I'm Rich Groves. I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs for the NextCDS, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to your speaker this evening, Ms. Evelyn Ireland, the Executive Director of the National Association of Dental Plans. Ms. Ireland received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from Texas Tech University and Master of Public Affairs from the Lyndon B. Johnson School at the University of Texas in Austin, with coursework at Harvard's JFK School of Government. For over 10 years, she was a Texas insurance regulator and has also experience in the Texas and Massachusetts legislatures and the U.S. Congress. So we're really privileged to have her with us for this evening. Our webinar will run approximately 45 minutes in length, and you can pose questions to Ms. Ireland at any time using the chat feature right here in our window or the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. We're going to hold those questions, I think, for the end of the presentation so that Ms. Ireland can share with you some of the knowledge that she brings and that experience. And we're going to collect as many of those questions as possible and address as many as we can in the time we have allotted, and see if we can't bring some specific light to a topic that's pretty interesting. And so without any further ado, let me introduce Ms. Evelyn Ireland.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate everyone taking part of their evening to listen to some of the information that the National Association of Dental Plans has collected over the years on the dental benefits industry. One of the main focuses of NADP is to collect data on the industry from the industry itself, but we also do surveying on the attitudes of key stakeholders, such as employers and consumers. In addition, we collaborate with other stakeholders on the establishment of the CDT claim forms, electronic claim standards, quality measures, and diagnostic codes. So we participate in all of those national and international functions relating to the practice of dentistry. If you didn't see it at the top of the screen, NADP's members provide dental benefits to over 92% of Americans with coverage, and we have large national companies, names you might know like Aetna, Cigna, United Healthcare, as well as the Delta Dental Plans, Blue Cross Blue Shield companies, and a lot of single state and regional companies as well. So I've queued up a selection of data from everything that we collect that fits into your future dental practice, and I hope this evening is beneficial to all of you. I'm going to start out talking about how dental benefits fits into your total practice income. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about products and the networks that support them and how those products operate. I also want to share with you some of the issues that came up in a recent meeting with the leadership of the Council on Dental Benefit Programs with our board of directors, because after all, there's no industry without its downsides, and I think that we all benefit from open dialogue about what some of those are. Finally, I want to touch on a couple of near-term changes that could impact in the near future how dentistry is practiced and how dental benefits are structured as well. And then I'll close with a few questions that kind of provide a summary of all of the information that I think you should consider as you enter dental practice. The Surgeon General's report in 2000 on oral health said that the lack of dental insurance, public or private, is one of the key impediments to consumers getting dental care. And just a side note here, you may have noticed that when I started out and on this slide, I've used the term dental benefits, but the Surgeon General used the term dental insurance. Some of the data that I'm going to show you includes a product called discount or savings plans. That's not really insurance. What it is more of a discount card, something like a Costco or a Sam's Club, where you get a card and you go to a particular location and you get kind of lower prices on the products. That's what a discount card is. There's a network that supports the discount card, but you go into the dentist and you use the discount card to get a lower fee, but the consumer pays full out of pocket for that product. So that kind of a product is really not insurance coverage. So when I use benefits, I'm including all products. And when someone talks about insurance, they're usually talking about the other products that we'll go over tonight. So how do consumers that have dental benefits act, and how is that different from consumers that don't have dental benefits? One of the surveys I mentioned that NADP does is a survey of consumers. We fielded it at the end of 2015, and what we found in that survey was that 53% of the consumers that had dental benefits had been to the dentist in the last 6 months, and 2/3 of them had been to the dentist within the last year. The most recent report that I saw from the federal government indicates that for the entire population, only 42% of the population had been to visit the dentist within the last year. The other self-reported behavior of the consumers in our recent survey was that 31% of them had a regular dentist, 31% of those with dental benefits. So I've seen higher numbers than that. That seemed a little low to me, but it is more common to have a regular dentist if you have dental benefits. The other factor with consumers with benefits is that when they need something beyond diagnosis and prevention, when they need something beyond that preventive visit 1 time a year or twice a year, they're more than twice as likely, about 2.5 times as likely, to go on with the course of treatment because they do have some support for the cost of that treatment. And cost in all of the consumer surveys that we see is the #1 factor standing between consumers and getting the dental care that they need. So how much of the total expenditures on dental services comes from private dental insurance? According to the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, their national expenditure survey, and the most recent publication was 2014, CMS shows that in 2014, 48% of the payment for services, for dental services, came from dental insurance or dental insurance. That grows as a percentage only in 2020, when all of you should be out and in practice, to 49%. But you notice over at the side of this slide, I put a little bracket that says 64%. The reason that's there is the private out-of-pocket payment, the consumer out-of-pocket, which is the blue bar at the bottom of this screen, consists of really 2 segments. 15% of that 30 of the, we'll go over to 2020, of the 38% in 2020 actually are payments that are made as co-payments or deductibles, or a payment after the consumer has reached their annual maximum, and we'll talk about that later. Those are payments that are triggered by insurance. So that consumer is making the payment out of pocket because they have insurance coverage. So really about 15% additional to the 49% is triggered by or comes from the insurance benefit. And only 23% of that 38% in 2020 is a patient that is fully private pay. Of course, the rest of the dental practice income or the expenditures for dental services comes from various public programs, primarily from Medicare, not from Medicaid very much, because dental is not covered in Medicare except for Medicare Advantage plans, and then it's usually only a preventive benefit, and that's a fraction of what the Medicaid program is. And from CHIP, Veterans programs, and the Department of Defense programs. But the majority of dental expenditures really are triggered by dental benefits. So I wanted to show you another slide that's very similar to this, but I didn't want to start with it because this shows the proportion that comes from each segment. And this slide is the same information from CMS projected into the future, and it shows the actual dollars. The size of the pie, if you look at it that way, that is being shared by all dental practices in the United States. According to CMS, the total in 2014 was $123.5 billion, and that should grow to about $150 billion in 2020. The one thing that I should mention about the projection in this slide is that CMS noted in their 2014 publication, because of the publication date, that they had not accounted for the growth in the Medicaid program that was coming from the expansion of Medicaid under the ACA. So this does not really account for public program growth. And the projection is more or less a straight line inflationary projection, so might not be entirely representative of the true growth rate if we do grow dental services. So let's look at next how many people are involved in the expenditures for these services. And this comes from NADP data. On an annual basis, we collect information from the carriers and from the federal government and other public programs about those that are enrolled in benefits. In 2014, which is the last full year that we have data for, there were roughly 205 million people that had some type of dental benefits, either public or private. So that's 64% of the population, and that includes both private insurance coverage and the public programs as well. You can see that there was quite a jump, about 3% of the population additionally covered in 2014, and 2014 was the first year that the Affordable Care Act went into operation. So the expansion of Medicaid was one of the factors in 2014 that grew the market. But let's look back for a minute to the years prior to that. You can see we kind of hovered at 57%, 58% of the market. We had a downturn in 2009. We had a drop of almost 10 million people that lost benefits due to economic changes, losses of jobs, jobs that were changed from full-time to part-time, and then that came back as the economy came back. So it's important to understand that the history of the population with dental benefits somewhat tracks economic trends and other big changes in the market. But in 2014, the big jump was due to the change in Medicaid, the increase in the level of poverty that was eligible for Medicaid benefits, the increase from 100% of poverty to 133% of the poverty that most of the states opted into. The interesting thing about the change is the change in Medicaid benefits wasn't primarily from children becoming insured under the Affordable Care Act. It was primarily from adults, and what you have here is a chart from one of the American Dental Association studies where they showed the states that had expanded or opted into the expansion of Medicaid that did have some adult dental benefits in their Medicaid program, and the amount that that change really increased their program. So the primary driver for the jump in population covered by dental benefits in 2014 was Medicaid. And just to put a number in your head, every percent of the population requires about 3.2 million additional enrollees. When we stayed at 57, 58%, we were gaining 1 or 2 million a year to stay up with population growth, but we really weren't getting ahead of population growth. So in 2014, there were actually about 12 million additional enrollees that came into the Medicaid program. Some of you that might know a little bit about the ACA, maybe particularly those of you that are thinking about pediatric dentistry, might be thinking, wait a minute, adults? The ACA brought more adults into the market. I thought the ACA extended children's benefits. Why didn't the increase in population come from children getting coverage instead of adults? The reason is that the Children's Health Insurance Program, which actually went into effect back in 1997, already covered children at several multiples of poverty. All of the states were above 133% of poverty. You can see on this map that comes from the Kaiser Family Foundation that there are only 3 states that are under 200% of poverty as the qualifying level for the Children's Health Insurance Program. We have another 29 states, the ones that are kind of that turquoisey blue, that are in the 200 to 300% range of the federal poverty level. And then we have 19 states that are over 300% of the poverty level. You might have the question in your mind right now, I know I always do when somebody starts talking about the poverty level, what's the poverty level right now? The poverty level for this year, for 2016, for a family of 4 is $32,320. When you go to 200% of poverty, like some of the children, well, the children in the majority of the states, between 200 and 300%, you're somewhere between 48,600 and 72,900. That doesn't really sound like poverty. And you're right if you're thinking that, because the median income in the United States is $50,000, and families of 4 that fall from kind of the high 30,000 range, from about the 38,000 range all the way up to the 100,000 range, are considered at various levels of the middle class. So many of the children that are covered under the CHIP program are really not in the poverty level coverage, but are really in the middle class. Maybe somewhere in the back of your mind, if you haven't thought about it, this is kind of my happy note for the evening. If middle class is about up to $100,000, I think most of you are probably headed into or directly into the upper class level of income. So that's my happy note for tonight. You're entering a profession where your income should put you in the upper class. So another thing you might have heard about in terms of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as some people might refer to it, is exchanges. What kind of coverage did exchanges bring to dental benefits? The only dental coverage that was really mandated as an essential benefit under the ACA was the pediatric dental benefit. But in the exchanges, for children to get benefits, many times the families want to buy coverage, so the exchanges mostly allow the offer of family coverage. In exchanges, the first year, only about 1.1 million were added to coverage, and if you remember my little note about 3.2 million is 1% of the population. We didn't get even to 1% of the population in the people that were added to dental benefits under exchanges. This is a slide for 2015 coverage, and we improved a little bit. It was 1.4 million basically that went into standalone dental plans, and there were about 900,000 children that were that came into coverage through all of the exchanges. Most of them went into medical plans that might have some dental benefit or might not. Only about 100,000 of those kids went into the standalone dental plans. So again, you can see the exchanges are really adding more adults to coverage than they are children to coverage. One of the happy notes about exchanges that may open up coverage in the future to another segment of the population, you see in the bottom of this slide all of the age groups that purchase standalone dental plans on the exchanges. And you notice that there's a very small number in the 65 or older. One of the reasons for that is the way exchanges operate is they take everybody in. It's called a no wrong door policy. So everybody comes in, but if you're eligible for a public program, if you're eligible for Medicaid, you get funneled off to Medicaid. If you're eligible for Medicare as a senior, you get funneled off to Medicare. And because originally the purchase of coverage on exchanges is connected to medical, everything starts at medical. If you're Medicare eligible, you get funneled off to Medicare and you don't have an opportunity to purchase standalone dental coverage. There's a big demand among seniors for dental coverage because many seniors, the baby boomers, have been accustomed to having that coverage through their employer. As a result, they want to continue that coverage, and it's not that easy to find in the private market. So these exchanges could become a conduit in the future for the purchase of by seniors of dental benefits. The federal exchange, which runs 37 of the states and will be running more in the coming years, has already made the technology fix that is needed to separate the purchase of dental and medical in the exchanges a priority. They have not gotten the money to do the technical fix, and they hope to have it done by 2018. So hopefully in the future we'll see more seniors able to purchase coverage through the exchanges. If the coverage is there, there's no reason to keep them from making the purchase if they want to do that. So you might be wondering, why is she talking so much about children and seniors? Here's the reason. Children and seniors are trending upward in their use of dental services according to a study that was done by the ADA Health Policy Center using the Medical Expenditure Panel Survey, or we call it the MEP survey data. So they got access to this data and they've been trending it. Working age adults, those adults that are between 19 and 64, have actually been trending downward, although there is a tiny bit of glimmer at the end of the road here, because in 2014 that seems to have been, in 2013 and 14, that seems to be leveling off. But working age adults' use of dental services has been trending down. Seniors and children has been trending up. So that's an important factor to consider as you enter a dental practice or as you build a dental practice. Where am I going to get the consumers, the patients that are going to use the services that I'm providing? So moving on, private dental benefits that I've talked about being that providing the 49% or 64% of all of the payment for services have been keeping they have been increasing in terms of the number of people in them and kind of tracking along with employment. This slide shows you how it tracks with employment and the trends with employment. But they haven't been keeping up with the growth in the population. From 2005 to 2014, although private dental benefits expanded by about 10.4 million, the population expanded by 24.5 million in that period of time. So the percentage of the market that is represented by private dental benefits actually dropped from 88.6% to about 75% of Americans with benefits. That's a huge shift, and it's also indicative of the shift to some of the public program expansion, which, remember that slide I showed you from CMS, really doesn't take into account how much public programs are expanding as a result of the ACA. So you might be wondering, why is this shift happening? Why are we going from private to public benefits? The ACA doesn't just have the impact of expanding Medicaid. It also is putting a lot of requirements on employers, a requirement to provide medical coverage if they're a large employer, reporting requirements, taxes. All of those requirements have made employers very nervous and very cautious about the cost of offering medical coverage. And medical coverage is, unfortunately, the first coverage that, maybe not unfortunately because we all want medical coverage too, but it's the first coverage that employers think to provide for their employees, the first one that is demanded by their employees. And with the cost of it trending up, they have become more cautious about both funding dental benefits and offering dental benefits. We do an employer tracking study. We used to do it every 3 years, and since the ACA, we have been doing it every year just to be able to really closely track the behavior of employers with regard to the offer of dental benefits. And one of the things that you see here from 2010 to 2014 in the chart at the bottom is that the percentage of group coverage, and group is basically employer coverage, that is has been provided over those 4 or 5 years has been trending down. There's a much larger percent of the market that is individual coverage. It's grown, it's actually almost doubled in that 4 or 5 year period. A couple of things happened. As the dental carriers got ready to offer individual benefits on the exchanges, they had to develop individual products to do that. A lot of them had not offered individual products. So they began to offer those products in the open market because they were preparing them for exchanges. But also, for the first time in 2013, in NADP's tracking study, we saw large and mid-sized employers drop in the percentage that were offering dental benefits by a statistically significant amount, by 3, 4, 5%. Large employers, those employers 500 and above, had always been at 95, 96% of them providing dental benefits. That began to drop into the low 90s. The mid-size employers from 50 to 500, they began to drop down into the 80% range as well. So for the first time, we saw employers not offering dental benefits or dropping dental benefits as they prepared to meet the ACA's requirements on medical. The other change that started happening is that employers began to shift the cost of dental benefits from them paying a large portion of it, and back in 2010, almost a quarter of employees received the full payment for the premium for dental benefits from their employer. It was only 10% that was an employee pay-all, or what we call voluntary coverage. That has increased into 2014 to where almost a quarter of the employees are paying the full amount of premium themselves. And employers are more and more shifting at least some of the cost, if not all of the cost, to employees. We only have 6.5% of employers now that are fully paying for the dental benefit for their employees. About 70% of them share in the cost, and usually when they share in the cost, they're paying at least 50% of the cost for their employees, sometimes employees plus dependents. The reason it's important to know who is paying for the coverage, there's a difference in the behavior of the individual. If they buy the coverage themselves, if they pay for the dental benefits themselves, they are more likely to utilize the benefits, at least to get their preventive care. So they're going to be higher utilizers of benefits. We find that those where the employer is paying more of the cost of the coverage are not always the ones who are using the dental benefits. So we'll move on to the types of dental benefit products that are out there in the market. What are you going to experience? You may know some of this now. This is from NADP's annual enrollment survey on dental benefit products, and you can see over a period of time that center bar that is growing is the DPPO, or the Dental Preferred Provider Organization. That is by far and large the predominant part of the marketplace. It's the predominant part of the marketplace because it has the largest networks, also because it pays some part of services whether the individual uses in-network dentists or out-of-network dentists. On this slide, there are 4 of the types of products that are based on networks: the DHMO, the DEPO, which is a very small fragment of the market, and our members have wanted us to track it because they think it's an emerging product. It basically is a mix of one of the requirements of the HMO that you have to go in network, so that's the exclusive part. And the other part is part PPO, which is that it pays on a fee-for-service or a service basis based on the procedures that are done. So it doesn't pay on capitation like an HMO. It pays on a service basis like a DPPO. The discount dental product, also called a dental savings plan, is the other type of product that is based on a network. Indemnity is really a product that is largely available primarily in rural markets and sometimes in very high income level white-collar employment, like law firms, medical practices. You'll see sometimes dental indemnity, which just, there's no network. It pays any dentist based on the terms of the policy. We are working on a glossary, actually, that has a lot of these terms in it. We have all of the major ones that I've used in the presentation. I need to add some of the acronyms to it, and I'm going to get it to Rich so he can post it, and you can have all of the definitions of these terms if they're not that familiar to you. I talked about networks and 4 of the products being network related, and I wanted to show you, based on the survey that we do on networks, how many dentists were in the various networks in 2014. The DPPO network, as I said, is the largest network, and we had 193,370 dentists total, and you see how it's arrayed between the specialist and the general dentist, primarily general dentists. Then the discount plans, 120,000, and the DHMOs, roughly 41,000. The DHMOs being a much smaller network because you want to have as many patients assigned to those networks, so the capitation amount that is paid to the dental practice is robust enough to pay for the services for those that access those services under a DHMO. I've been asked, and I wouldn't be surprised if you ask the question, how do you get this information, and of the 194, what percentage is that of dentists that are in private practice? We get this information by actually taking the dental directories of the members of NADP, and remember that NADP's members provide well over 90% of all of the coverage in the United States. So we take their dental directories, and we have a company that goes through and actually does a deduplication process. So this is fairly close to an actual census. The only place you might see a dentist counted more than once is if they live close to a border in maybe Texas and Arkansas, Nevada, California, and they are licensed to practice in both states and go back and forth. We might have some double counting there, but this is pretty purely a census of the dentists participating in dental networks. We haven't seen a recent number published about the number of dentists in active private practice. There have been a number of problems with the methodologies for those groups that are collecting that information. The contractor that we used for this told us that they believe that dentists in active private practice is about 205,000. I put that out there, but we don't usually reference it as a percentage of dentists in active private practice because we don't have what we consider a really strong source on the total number of dentists. So I talked about dental discount plans. I wanted to talk for a few minutes. Well, I guess before I go on to that, there's another important point that particularly would be of interest to you, and that is how many networks do dentists participate in? Is that that 193,000, that's the number of dentists, but how many networks? Do they participate in Cigna and Aetna's and Delta's networks, or how many networks? As we counted the dentists that were in the different networks, what we found was that a particular dentist usually participated in somewhere between 4 to 6 DPPO networks, a couple of discount networks, and usually just one DHMO if they were working with a DHMO. So now let's go on to products. The two more prominent products in the marketplaces, and in some areas like California, you'll see a lot more dental HMOs. You see dental HMOs usually in urban areas. Dental PPOs are wider spread. How do they pay for services? How does that payment for services or the reimbursement come to the dentist? I mentioned the dental HMO pays on a per enrollee that is assigned to the dental practice, a payment every month called a capitation or a per head kind of payment. Then there are co-pays that the consumer pays when they come for an office visit or a service. That goes to the general dentist. The specialists have to be approved for referral, and most specialists are usually paid still on a fee-for-service basis by the HMO with an approved referral. From the viewpoint of both the dentist and the consumer, it could be a pro or a con. From the consumer's viewpoint, one of the advantages of the dental HMO, besides the fact that they usually state their co-payments in a dollar amount, so it's like $10 or $15 or $20 for an office visit, $20 for an amalgam, and that makes it more predictable rather than a percentage, the way DPPOs state the payment for services. But there's also no annual maximum. There's no maximum amount of services. Really, the control on the amount of services is up to the dentist, what he or she thinks they need to do to keep the patient healthy, and also, what the practice is being supported to provide. So on the dental PPO, they pay on a discounted fee-for-service basis to the network dentist. So the network dentist gets a schedule of, say, the 100 most common procedures, and the 100 most common procedures under the CDT really account for 95% of the services that are delivered in dentistry. There's a deductible that the consumer pays. It's usually in the $50 to $80 range, something like that. That deductible is usually waived on preventive care, so there is no cost barrier to getting the patient in for preventive care, for the office visit, the cleaning, the x-rays. That's usually paid at 100%. The basic services like fillings, root canals, those are paid at 80% of the discounted fee, and major services are paid at 50%. There's also an annual maximum, and then there's a different reimbursement to out-of-network dentists. The consumer can still go to an out-of-network dentist. They just get a lower reimbursement. Instead of $180.50, it might be $80 or $80, $60, $50. In most states, you won't see anything below the 50 because the states have an insurance rule that it has to be paid at least 50% in order to qualify as insurance coverage. So just let's maybe think of an example. If your fee for a one-surface amalgam was $120 and the discounted fee was $100, we'll make this one simple, then from the patient you would collect 20% or $20 for the one-surface filling. From the insurance company, you would get the $80 for the one-surface filling. Of course, there's some paperwork and some queries that go back and forth. You may not collect from the consumer at the point that they get the service, or if you already know what the insurance company is going to pay, you can collect at that point. That's part of what you work out in your practice. The other common element that I referred to on that slide in dental coverage is an annual maximum. You see the 4 bars on the left-hand side of the screen relate to DHMO. There is some experimentation in DHMOs with some very large annual maximums, but for the most part, they still don't have annual maximums. The DPPO actually for quite a long time had trended where annual maximums were going from 1,000 on average to 1,500 and 2,000. And as the ACA came along and the economy turned down in 2009, we saw those annual maximums again begin to decrease back down to 1,000. One of the reasons is that one of the points that we collect in our data is how many consumers hit annual maximums. It's usually, depending on the year, somewhere between 92% and 96% don't hit the annual maximum. So only 2 to 6 or 7% hit the annual maximum. As a result, employers feel like they can lower the annual maximum back down to 1,000, and then they can keep their contribution maybe at the same dollar amount and have it be a higher percentage of premium. That's one of the cost-shifting techniques that employers are using so that they don't have to disappoint their employees. Instead of really changing the amount or lowering the amount that they contribute to premium, they change the benefit structure, lower the annual maximum. It still works for most of their employees. That has been a downward trend until the last year. In 2014, we did see an uptick again. So maybe that is again stabilizing. But that's kind of the picture for the last several years on annual maximums. So I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to talk for a few minutes about, make sure I've got enough time here, I wanted to talk for a few minutes about some of the items that we discussed with the Council on Dental Benefit Programs of the American Dental Association. My board of directors meets with the leadership of that council on an annual basis, and they bring to us issues that they see coming from their dentist members or concerns that the council members themselves have, and this slide lists 4 of the things that we discussed in our meeting just a month ago in April. One of them is administrative cost. Administrative cost is a problem both for the carriers and for the dental offices. We talked about the credentialing process and all of the new outreach that is going on because of a number of laws in the states about transparency in the directories and a need to reconfirm all of the information from the dentist's office, not just original onboarding credentialing and re-credentialing every 3 years, checking all of the records every 3 years, but also re-verifying that the information is current, so what's in your directory that's out-facing to the consumer is current. We actually have a process going on to streamline credentialing and get to a core set of elements that should make that process more administratively efficient for both sides. That's been going on for a couple of years, and we're in the final phase of the pilot project where we hope to be able to show the savings in that process, both in times and dollars for both sides, and we talked about that. Another issue we talked about, and I'll go to the next slide and then come back, so we also talked about electronic transactions and about the savings for both the dental office and for the dental carrier by processing electronically, which also facilitates auto adjudication. Auto adjudication is just the claim going through without any human hands touching it. It's seeing everything's fine. It gets electronically remitted if that kind of remittance is accepted by the dental office. Excuse me. The members of the Dental Benefits Council were really surprised by the low level of electronic transactions. This is the median that is shown here. The average is actually 61%. And one of the things that we agreed would be a solution both for consistency in EOBs, the evidence of benefits that goes back to the dentist and back to the consumer, and an administrative cost would be electronic transactions. So electronic transactions are something that we both agreed we need to work harder to encourage more of to solve problems for both the payers and for the dentist's office as well. The benefit structure was also one of the issues we discussed, and I wanted to move to the slide on trends as we discuss the benefit structure because, as I said, within the products that are in place in the private market today, and only somewhere between 92 and 99, and with 92 to 99% of employees being happy with those benefits, never hitting their annual maximums, employers don't really see a reason to change the product. 75% of employees are getting a contribution to the premium, which lowers the cost to them. And actually premiums in DPPOs, because of competition, decreased a couple of % last year. So there really isn't in the dental system a real catalyst for changing that structure. The forces that could change the structure of the dental benefit, we've really seen more on the medical side, a push for lower cost, linkages between oral health and overall health that are getting dental included in ACOs and are beginning to see the integration in some market sectors of at least the pediatric benefit into medical, a focus on population health. one of the drawbacks or one of the shortcomings in our industry has been that we haven't had usable diagnosis codes for dentistry, and that is something that is changing very quickly. I have a staff person that participates in the in ITSTA, which is the international governing body for SNODENT, and the DDS codes and SNODENT are in the process of being combined, and that governing body has developed a 250 diagnosis code reference set for general dentistry that will make diagnosis codes really usable in dentistry. I know in most of the dental school settings you do use Axiom, which has the DDS codes in them. Well, SNODENT and DDS codes are being merged, and this reference set is being based on the merged set of codes. That should be completed by the end of this year, and that will begin to move into both the payer side and into dental offices. The large DSOs will be, I think, the first to really integrate those. The large group practices will have the ability to use those diagnosis codes, and they can be translated through the practice management system to the payers in terms of ICD-10 codes and CDT codes. So for the first time, payers will be getting information that points back to diagnosis codes, and the collection of that information over the near term and the long term is going to allow for the real changes in the benefit structure that are based on population health and based on risk, that will really allow for quality measures in dentistry, for outcome measures. So the use of diagnosis codes, the actual usable set of codes for most dentists will begin to be integrated in the next 3 to 5 years into practice settings and then into the payer side, and that will be really the catalyst for going more to risk-based type products. So I think as we get through those trends, and I just barely touched on those, and I know we're close, I want to wrap up quickly by just bringing all the information together into a set of questions that you should be asking as you set up a practice or you enter a practice. Going back to the early information, what patients will my practice see or the practice that I join see? Are they going to be private pay patients, that 23% of the 36% of the population that produces 23% of the revenue? Is it going to be public program patients today, that 15% of the population that produces 13% of the revenue? Or is it going to be the insured patients, the private benefit programs that are 49% of the population and produce 64% of current expenditures for dental services? What's the mix going to be? Is it working age adults? Is there a way we can target seniors? Is my practice going to focus on children? Am I going to have a patient mix of all three? And in particular, what's the level of automation? What kind of practice management software does the practice have or are you going to get? Does it facilitate electronic claims? Can it translate the information back from the payer into your system? Or are the claims filed on paper? Are the patient records electronic? And does it incorporate diagnostic codes? Particularly as we move into the future, that incorporation or the plan for the practice management system to incorporate diagnostic codes is really, really going to be critical. So I'm not sure where we are in terms of the time, Rich, or we've only got 6 or 8 minutes left.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I will be stepping in. Hello, everybody. My name is Jill Herzog. I will be stepping in to be the moderator for the Q&A with Miss Evelyn Ireland. So we have a few questions, actually. Yesterday, I know when we were discussing the presentation, you told a great story about a dentist who dropped his coverage. Can you share how his practice was affected by this choice?
Yes, as I was doing some research for this, I was looking through some of the dental consultants that work with dental practices and saw a case study where a dentist had insurance coverage in his practice. He went to a seminar and was convinced that he could make the practice go without having any insurance, and on Monday went into the practice, told his staff to cancel all the insurance coverage, get out of the contracts, and they notified their patients that they would no longer be accepting insurance. The patients would need to file on their own. Over the next 6 months, that dentist's practice revenue dropped from about $850,000 to that year down to $480,000. So dropped by about 57%. 94% of the patients that had insurance coverage went to another dentist in the network because that's more beneficial to the patient. They get more paid by the insurance company and less out of pocket. To try and right the ship, that dentist had dropped 2 staff, but in that first year, the overhead, which had been, I think, at $583,000, obviously was more than the $480,000 he had coming in. So his overhead was 118%. So not only did he not get any income that year, he actually had a loss in order to keep the practice open. He hired this practice consultant. They looked at the insurance carriers that the practice had previously and which ones were reimbursing the most and had the largest percentage of the consumers or patients. They pulled 4 of them back in, and that 4 had represented about 35% of the practice income. In the next year, they increased from that 480 low up to 670,000, and when they wrote that case study, they said they were on track the next year to get to 750. So obviously he was becoming profitable. He also worked on his case presentation skills, and he got a large portion of the patients that had been with his practice previously to come back. So insurance was really an important segment of his practice and important to his profitability.
Absolutely. I have another question here. How do things like practice efficiencies, paperless offices, and such embraced by DSOs and private practices impact patient access to care?
You know, from the patient side, they probably don't see those efficiencies. Those efficiencies are really part of what the practice does behind the scenes to bill the insurance company, to get the payment back from the insurance company. They may see it in terms of the dentist and the office staff being happier if the processes are more efficient and they're spending less time in frustrating phone calls and pushing paper back and forth. I will tell you, one of the things I hear from the insurance company side is when they get paper claims. Literally with paper claims, you've got the claim form, you have attachments, you have, you know, the x-rays, you have all sorts of documentation you have to send, and many times the attachments are not even labeled with the name of the patient, the birth date of the patient, so they may not all stay together in the envelope. So you get an envelope full of these claims and you pull them apart. They're not always labeled properly, and you're trying to put them together, and you think you don't have an x-ray for this particular claim, but you really do. It was with the paperwork, the other paperwork, and it got shuffled around. So the electronic process gets rid of all of that. Even if you're just doing electronic attachments, there's a process where you can put your attachments in this vault and just refer to the number. Well, you know, even if you're doing electronic attachments, at least they always go to the right claim number. So it's frustrating on both sides, and it creates administrative inefficiencies on both sides. So really the whole electronic paperless process, certainly it's the way we all operate in our lives now with our cell phones, and everything is available at the touch of a button. And new practices and the larger practices are all going that direction so that everything is really seamless and more efficient. But in terms of the patient, I guess it could give the dentist and the dental hygienist and the staff more time to deal with the patients if they don't have paperwork issues that they're having to sort out and answer the front office staff about. So it could expand the number of patients that a practice could see. So in that way, maybe it would affect the patient. I don't know whether I'm the best person to answer that. Maybe we have one of our clinicians come on and do a from the clinic point of view webinar for you.
Well, I thought that was a great answer. One last quick question. Your group tracks a great deal of data. How does access to big data enable a group like a DSO to provide better care to patients?
I just came from the American Dental Service Organization conference, and I also, the week before that, went to the National Oral Health Conference where they had several presentations on some of the practices that are involved in serving large public program populations. And it really is amazing to see the data that they have, that they can look at the trends in decrease in emergency room use, which is very important because of the cost of that, and redirecting that cost to dental care. You can really expand dental care, particularly in public programs, so that can really improve access. But having electronic records and being able to mine the data in the wider practice for trends in certain populations using certain services more and digging into what's the reason for that. Is it the water supply that we're having more caries, or what is happening with the use of a particular service? The availability of that data, particularly in large group and the DSO practices that connect so many of the practices, is really a boon to improving the practice of dentistry and improving access. So that's a great question. Big data, and that's one of the reasons we're so excited about diagnostic code information, because getting that information from across all of the carriers and putting it into some kind of big data matrix is really going to allow us to track across carrier population health, which we've never been able to do before. So big data is definitely going to have an influence on the future of both the dental benefits side and the delivery of dentistry. Great question.
Great. And just because, in case somebody has another question that we don't have any time for, where can dental students turn to find similar great resources like this to continue on these topics?
Well, we're certainly happy through NextDDS. If there are questions that you didn't get to, I'm happy to answer those in writing and give them to NextDDS to post. NADP has, Facebook and Twitter, and you can follow that for kind of new information that gets published. We have a website that does have consumer information on it. And if there's a particular question, feel free to email me. I think on one of the last slides.
I think if you hit the next slide.
I forgot to go there, didn't I? I think the email address is there, and NADP is certainly happy to provide any information that we have or refer you to resources that we have seen for information as well. I do that for reporters all the time. So we collect a lot. We know sources of information in addition to just our own information.
Fantastic.
And actually in that weekly news on dental benefits, I noticed that there's an F missing at the end. It's Smart Brief, not Smart Brie. Maybe some of it's fine, but it's not Smart Brie, it's Smart Brief. So we're missing an F there. I hadn't noticed that until just now. I guess I'm hungry.
Well, we'll make sure to update that, since we will be sending the presentation out to make sure that they get the right links. So thank you for letting us know. But other than that, thank you so much, everybody, for your attention tonight. Thank you, excuse me, I apologize, Evelyn, for your time as well in presenting, and for Aspen Dental for sponsoring our session. We'll be closing the session tonight with a quick questionnaire. Don't forget, to be eligible for the raffle that was mentioned in our invite, you must provide the feedback to qualify. It'll pop up once I close the session. Once again, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you for part 4 of this outstanding continuum, where we will discuss the ways technology can improve the efficiency of your future practice. We've included details here, including the registration link, and hope you'll join us for an informative session. On behalf of everyone at the next DDS, thank you and have a great night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.